Hey everyone, I am so excited that you guys are all here and joining me and the DevC Boston crew today for this Spark AR Creator Day. I hope you're as excited as I am because what we're going to get out of this is going to be, at the very minimum, your very own published effect. Exciting. So, I just want to backtrack a little bit, give you a bit more information to let you know how I landed here, sitting in front of you, talking about Spark AR today. It's a funny way that I came across Spark AR actually. I was scrolling through Facebook and checking out these little overlays that were on top of people's profile pics on Facebook, and I was kind of like, what's going on with that? As all good quests begin with that question. And so when I looked into it further, I realized these were things called profile frames and you could make them for Facebook. So I did. I created a profile frame for Canada Day, the 150th birthday that we celebrated here in my country a few years ago. I just kind of haphazardly put together a little frame and threw it up there. And then overnight, all kinds of people were using this. When I say all kinds, I mean not my mama, not my cousin, like strangers across the country were using my art on their profile pics. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So there was this whole panel that you could go into and manage all of the profile frames. There was a separate tab, and it was what was at the time AR Studio. And it would lead you into this whole other wonderland of what I discovered were AR effects. That was my first experience with Spark AR. And I was super excited to try it. I downloaded it, or I went to go and download everything, and then I realized that being a Windows girl, I had no opportunity to build using this software. Sad trombone, I was devastated. I needed a Mac. And so it was constantly in the back of my head. I'm like, I need to get my hands on a Mac. I didn't have any friends that would be willing to let me borrow theirs and download the software and install it. So I got crafty. I went to my local tech place where I get my screen fixed whenever I break my phone. That doesn't actually happen. Yes, it does. Anyway, I went to them and I was like, okay, guys, help a sister out. I just need a Mac for a day. And they rented me a Mac for a day. So I downloaded Spark AR Studio. I built in just a couple of hours my first effect. It must have been coming up on Christmas because my first effect for Facebook was a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer effect. I drew the antlers, I did the red nose and stuff, and I built it. I did a face tracker thing, and I published my first effect within a couple of hours. I was so sad, I have to tell you, when I had to return the Mac at the end of the day. And all I thought about for the time after that was how I could find a way to get the resources to get a Mac. It actually ended up going a little bit longer than I thought. I would say almost a year. And then I was reintroduced to Spark AR because they had announced that they would be opening up Instagram camera for effects. And I thought, this is something I have to be involved in, full stop. I don't want gifts for the rest of my life if I can just get a Mac for Christmas that year. And guess what? I did. And blessed for that gift because it did land me to where we are right now. And I've been building effects ever since. So the cool thing about that, a neat side effect, is that there were a ton of people who used my effects. And over this course of time, thankfully, and some sort of strange blessing, billions of impressions of the work that I've done has been out there and across the world. And it's been just an incredible experience to see people using my work. I thought it was really cool to, have people beyond my circle of friends and family using my work, but to see it out there in all different countries, different places, on different faces has been really, really exciting. And this is the passion that I have and why I'm bringing it to artists and creators that I come across, because there's this whole wonderful world of augmented reality that we can take what we've already done and what we're well versed in my case, illustration, graphic design, creative direction, and bring it into augmented reality. And that's where we are today. So I'm very excited to get started on building this effect with you. Now, when we're talking about building effect, it's not just about getting into the Spark AR Studio and building. There's a whole process around this that sometimes is overlooked and maybe not talked about enough. So for me, it always starts with an idea.
So I have a regular checklist that I'll go through. What are the things that I'm passionate about? What are the causes that I can get behind? What are the things that move me? The things that get me energized? And when I was talking with the folks over at DevC Boston, we were brainstorming some of this stuff, and we came up with the concept of naming our favorite things. So when we were putting our list together, it happened to be that so many of these favorite things were food-related items. And so the theme for today is, what is your favorite food? Now, it's pretty easy for me. I shouldn't say it's super easy. I was kind of tossed up between two, but one was the clear winner. The first thought was ice cream. I love ice cream. Nothing wrong with that. However, if I were to sit on an island for the rest of my life and could only eat one thing, it would probably be tacos. And so here we are. We're going to be exploring a little bit of taco time with Lianne today. Woohoo! And we're going to be building an effect around the theme of tacos. Now, the wonderful thing about coming up with an idea that you're passionate about is that it always seems to translate into the effect that you're building. And also on those lull kind of quiet moments when you're kind of ready to turn in or give up, when you have passion for the idea, it will help to propel you to the end, and in this case, help you to publish the effect that you're building. And so the next step for me always when I have the idea is then I hit up Google. Thank you very much, Google, for being there for me always when I need inspiration. I go and I type in what it is that I'm interested in. In this case, I typed in tacos, and of course you have the typical graphics of clip art of dancing tacos and all of that. And I thought, okay, that's cool. We can build something. I'll probably throw a taco on my head because that's super easy and it's, like a taco hat. But what else? So you think about the peripheral ideas that deal with taco time. So what's another concept around tacos? Well, I thought, okay, let's Google fiesta. Let's Google Mexican celebration. And then what you see are a whole bunch of other concepts that will lend itself to your overall idea. So in this case, there were a lot of visuals with, the things that would be happening within a fiesta. So things like the pinwheels that are decorative and the pennants that hang from the ceiling. And what else I also found I was discovering while I was going through this inspiration explorative phase was the palette that I would be using. So these are all kind of side notes that aren't often talked about, but they are really an integral part of building your effect. So now that I had the inspiration, I'm going to go and I'm going to, for myself, build assets, and I can do that easily. I use an iPad and I use Procreate. And because I come from an illustration background, I have the luxury of being able to translate what I see in my head and building graphics out of it. For those of you that aren't that savvy or prefer not to or don't have the time, whatever it might be, if you can't generate your own illustrations, then there are great resources and places that you can go to for minimal cost, sometimes free, that you can download your own graphics around whatever theme it is that you've decided. So for example, there's Creative Market. That's one excellent go-to resource, very, very affordable graphics and fonts and all kinds of neat things in that community. Just be sure when you are going to download any of these assets that you're being mindful of the license that you are purchasing. So oftentimes for a little bit more, you can purchase what's called a commercial license, and that will allow you to use that artwork in other, say, forward-facing or large-scale projects or for brands, etc. Just make sure that you're reading the fine print if you are going to be using any other material that's created by someone other than yourself. So some of the things that make AR really special are the fact that you're not limited to a static plane that's just kind of one layer and one dimensional. The great thing about AR is it's immersive and it's dimensional. So when you're building out the design, consider that. Consider the background, the foreground, the space around the user. These things are really critical components that help build an excellent AR effect. Another thing to consider is the animation element. So in traditional kind of two-dimensional design, you're always stuck with a static graphic, and there's a time and a place for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But to take advantage of AR, why not animate it? More on that later when we're jumping into building the effect. Another thing that's really great about AR is the capacity to have a response from the user. So traditionally, again, in 2D graphics, all we've done is just kind of put it out there. It's a linear process. This is your image, and that's how you you absorb it and you understand it. Whereas with AR, you actually get a response from the user. So take advantage of that when you're considering what to do in the design of your effect. Another great little element that you can add in that adds some interest to your design is to add in a little bit of music or sound. Those are nice enhancements that will help to bring out the personality of the effect that you're creating. And finally, I think the one thing that's most exciting for me for AR is that the user actually completes the piece. So what I mean by that is you can build an effect. You do not have to tell the whole story. You can kind of bring it to a point and then hand it over to the user and allow them to finish the story with you. And that's what makes this something that is an element of co-creation, which is extremely exciting in AR. So now that we've got our design idea, we have the assets, we have the design concept, let's get really specific about this particular effect that we're going to build today. So while I was thinking about this, I thought we can take those little banner pennants, we can do something that's kind of in the visual space above. Let's bring something in behind. So we're going to take advantage of background segmentation and cutting out the user and allowing things to happen in behind to add for depth like we were talking about. And then also, I love the idea of the little pinwheels that I saw in some of the inspiration board, and then the cactus, that was kind of fun. And of course, the taco. The taco is the main piece, and that'll be centered right front and center as like a taco hat. Now, there are different ways that we could level up this effect, but that's probably enough for what we're going to be doing in the time that we have together today. And once we have all of those elements in place, what we're going to do is bring them to life by animating them in the patch editor. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's dig into Spark AR and get it started. Okay, so I've opened up Spark AR Studio to the completed effect. This is what yours is going to look like, or what it will look like once completed. So I'm going to hit play and you can watch the animations roll. There, a couple of the cactus popped up in the front and the back. You can kind of see this faded banner in the distance, one in the front, got a taco sombrero, a couple of avocados on the cheeks, and we have some rolling pinwheels in the front. So if you're as excited as I am, let's get right into it. What we're first going to do is begin by opening the background template. So we're going to go new from template. We're going to use the background option. And there's Delapo. Again, greeting us. Hello, Delapo. Great to see you. Delapo is one of the, I guess you could call them simulator video models, and we all as creators spent a lot of time with him, watching him react in different ways, nodding his head, and showing us the different ways our effects are going to look. Now, let's look at the interface here. Let's do a quick little overview, and perhaps before we go further, we'll switch to me being in the camera. Oh, Delapo. There I am. Hi again. So as you saw, I just went over to the left there, and you can choose what is viewed in the simulator. We had Delapo there. There are a few different options. If you select cameras and you select your webcam, then you'll have, like what I'm showing you here, just a visual of your own face. And before I get into what's happening in this background template, let's do a quick overview of the UI. Hopefully you've had a few minutes already to explore Spark AR Studio. If you haven't, let's just look here to our left. This is our scene hierarchy, where you have the device, which is what will be viewing the effect, as well as the camera and several different objects that have been added by default under there. Below there, you'll see the asset panel. This is where we load in different things like 3D assets, 2D assets like the images that we've collected from inspiration, as well as patches, etc. That's where anything that you bring in essentially into Spark AR is going to land. Now there's also a layers tab. We will be looking at that today, so keep that in mind. And then here is our viewport. You can zoom in and zoom around and kind of get close to what it is that you're looking at. And it gives you the opportunity to inspect your effect from different angles in a 3D format, very typical of a 3D layout, what you see in that viewport. We're looking at the simulator here. That's me. This is what your preview of your effect will look like. And then once you take your attention over here to the right, you're going to see anything that you select within Studio will have changes appear within this properties panel. So you see I selected focal distance. If I select camera, you see that things change over here on the properties panel and so on. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what's happening within the background template. I've selected canvas here. The way I like to think of canvases is it's similar to what you would use if you were painting on a canvas. So you have your bounding box really, and then what you're putting into it or onto it, the elements like images, 3D assets, things like that are all within the canvas. So if we open this one up, you're going to see that there are a couple of rectangles and they contain the user, which is me. You can see that I'm kind of softly cut out and we can change the settings for that. There is a material setting that we can change, but for now we'll just leave it. And this cuts the background out. So we will be able to bring in different elements that will give us that depth and a spatial effect that we're looking for in an augmented reality effect. Now as well, we have a rectangle that's located behind me, and this is going to be changeable. We're gonna change it up to our own background, and then that will really recreate the whole space that we're viewing ourselves in when we look through the camera. So what else can I tell you? Let's actually just have a look down here where this blue call-out box is. Anytime we open a template, you're going to find that there are these little blue prompts, which are super handy. It actually just draws your attention to the things that need to be edited or changed to make it your own. So for us, I'm just going to X out because we don't really need to follow that prompt. I do have an idea of what I'm going to be doing for this effect. And to begin, I always like to bring in the assets that I'll be using. And then that way I don't have to go searching for it when I'm in the middle of building something. So as a best practice, try and keep them all in one folder. What I'm going to do is bring them in, either using this Add Asset button, or I can go into File and bring them in, but we're just going to do Add Asset. We're going to import from computer, and there they all are. I always name them intuitively as well with image, IMG at the beginning, and then I know that those are images that when I just glance over to my asset panel, that's what I'm looking at, that they are textures. I use image and texture interchangeably, but really when we're referring to it here in Spark AR Studio, they are textures. Textures basically give the visual identity to the materials. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So now that they're coming into Spark, Spark is doing its thing and probably compressing them. We're not going to worry so much about that. I'm okay with the file sizes, so we'll let that roll in the background. What I'd like to do is talk about how we're going to lay out this effect. Now, this effect really has a lot to do with depth and where things are positioned in relation to the user. So if we refer back to this canvas here, you can see that we're going to be able to add elements to the background as well as the foreground. But rather than try and control it within this visual hierarchy, we're going to do it through layers. And this will give us a bit more control over where we're positioning the elements. So we'll just take your attention over to the layers panel here in the top left, and you'll see that there's a user layer. That's me, that's this cutout. And then there's the background layer. That's the one you see behind me. And they've just thrown in an additional layer. But I'm going to change this because what I'd like to do is have a layer that's going to sit in front of me as the user and a layer that's going to sit in behind me. So I'm going to name that intuitively. I'm going to call it in front of user layer. Awesome. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to name it behind user layer. Super natural language always helps me a lot. Now, when you're trying to understand what is actually positioned in front and behind, the way that I try and remember it is bottom to the back. So what's on the bottom is going to be in the back, and therefore what's at the top is going to be in the front. So it doesn't make sense really for behind user layer to be in front because it's at the top. So let's bring that literally behind the user. That makes more sense because B for bottom, behind, and now it's going to be positioned in the correct order when I'm placing things on those layers in front and behind of me, the user. Let's go back to the scene panel and let's start populating the canvases that I'm going to make that will sit on those different layers. So I'm going to add a canvas to the camera hierarchy, and to do so I'm just going to right click and follow along with add a canvas, and it automatically adds a canvas there. We're just going to rename that right away so then it doesn't get lost in the mix and I forget what it is. This one we're going to name consistently with the layer front of user, and what we're going to be doing is adding our assets that are going to be in front of the user to that canvas. We'll just make the other canvas that we need right now, which is the canvas that's going to sit behind the user. We're going to right click again on camera, add canvas, and again rename that behind user. And what I want to draw your attention to is how we're going to associate those to the appropriate layers. So again, when you do anything in the scene, you're going to be selecting something. The properties will change over here to the right. So I've selected front of user. I'm going to make sure that that is associated to the in front of user layer. Very intuitive. I'm going to go over here to the behind user. Now it's still sitting on the in front of user layer. We want to change that to the behind user layer. This is really going to help to create that spatial effect that we're looking for. Now the things that we want in front of the user would be the banner and then the little pinwheels that you saw in the effect, as well as one of the cactuses sitting in the front. So let's add a rectangle. Again, I'm going to right click on this selected canvas, add a rectangle, and I'm going to rename it right away. It's going to be banner front. And what it's done is added this square to the viewport, and what I want to draw your attention to is a couple of really cool built-in pieces of functionality that make life easier with Spark, and that's why we're using rectangle for this, because this is something that's associated to a rectangle. If you select this rectangle either in your hierarchy or within the viewport over here on the properties, you're going to see the properties for width and height. Now I could just take one of the edges of this rectangle and stretch it out by dragging on it. But what I want to always do is have that rectangle fit the width of whatever camera or device is viewing it. So once it's selected, I can just slide over here to the width field, and when I select it, there's this prompt to fill width. Yes, that's what I want to do. You see something here has changed. I'm going to actually pull my properties panel over so you can see the full word, and it says relative. So essentially that box is going to be relative to the size regardless of how you squash or stretch it, and that's exactly what I would like, because there's nothing worse than having a graphic that's kind of stuck and floating and doesn't fill the width of the device that you're viewing it on. Height is okay for now. We'll have to see what it looks like when we bring in the texture and when we associate the material to it, because we have to give it some sort of visual image, because right now this is another thing that's very intuitive to us that have been using Spark for a long time. But when you see this black and white checkerboard, what it means is that there's no texture that's actually associated to the box. What you have to say is, hey, here's a box. This is the material we're going to put on the box. And the material is composed of a texture. I liken it to like dressing a human. So your object is like what we have, the box, and then you're going to give it material, clothing, and what gives the clothing its individual look and feel is the texture. So let's just get our material associated to this object, and to do so, we'll still focus on the properties panel. And there's this area here that says materials. Click on that plus button. I don't see a material that I'd like to associate to it, so I have to create a new one. By clicking on it, it automatically defaults to material 0 or whatever the number might be in succession. It gives it this basic kind of gray box. And now if we look back over here into the assets panel, that's where it's added it, and we can change the properties there. So I'm going to click on material 0. I'm going to rename it. This is going to be banner front. And we'll do matte. I usually like to keep them all one word, lowercase, uppercase. And with that still selected, we're going to go back over to the properties. And what we're going to do is define the texture. Like I said, I use them interchangeably, texture or image that's going to be associated to that material. So let's choose one. Now we pre-populated these because we brought all of those images in already. I want to choose the image banner. And voila, there it is. Now it's associated to the object, to the material that's applied to the object. Now I find that's a little bit squishy. I'd like to stretch it out a little bit. How do we do that? Well, we'll select it again in the viewport, and I can actually just drag the handle here, bring it down. I am completely okay with that. Now when I put my head up here, I can see, as we had specified with the layer and on the actual rectangle that we created, it is going to be in front of the user. So that is working, and that is awesome. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for the banner that's going to sit in behind the user. Now if we've done it right with our layers, it should just show up right behind my head. I'm going to right click on behind user. Once again, we're going to add a rectangle. Now just like we did before, we're going to click on that in the viewport or in the hierarchy, zip over here to the properties. We're going to click into that field and then select again fill width, and that's going to always squash and stretch depending on the camera or the effect of the device that we're going to be using. And we want to create a material to apply to this object. How do we do that? Once again, we'll go down here and look for materials, add the plus button, and I actually see the material that I created for the banner. I'm going to use that again. We're just going to change the way that that object is oriented so they don't look like they're completely stacked and equal. But I can then apply that and reuse it, which is nice. I'm going to bring it down too. So now they're both kind of equal looking in size and stuff. It would be nice if we changed their rotation. I just noticed that I didn't rename the rectangle. Let's go ahead and do that so we don't forget and get confused later. And sorry, that's going to be banner behind. Okay, awesome. Now, is it working though? No, it's not behind me. Why is that? So we select the thing that we want to change, go back over here and realize, oops, okay, it's still on the in front of user layer. When I switch to the behind user layer, it's now, if you see it, it's behind my head. That is working, and that is super cool. Okay, let's give it a bit of rotation so that they're both offset and they don't look like they are stacked on top of one another. We can do that right here. Let's give it like a, I don't know, -15. That tilts that one that way. And let's go to the banner front and let's just give the rotation here for the transformation rotation. We'll just give it a +15. So now they're kind of offset. That's cool. I like how that looks. Awesome. Let's move on to the next thing, which is going to be the rectangles that are going to be sitting in front of the user. Now, since we've named things intuitively, let's go over here to what's going to be in front of the user. We're going to create by adding a rectangle. This one we're going to name Pinwheel 1 because there are 3. And that's going to be in front of the user. We're going to take it and we're going to actually just bring it down to the front right. Now the other cool thing, I'm just dragging and pulling on the corner here of that rectangle to kind of shape it how I want and size it. The other cool thing about the rectangles, not only are you able to have it fill the width or the height, you can actually pin it to the edges of the device, which is a really handy thing. So again, if you're on different size devices, it's going to stick to where you want it to be. In this case, we want it to stick to the corner. And if you look back over here on the properties, we're going to see something called pinning. Now, when I mouse over, you're going to see a little animation to show you how it's going to stick. Now, I would like the selected items to be the ones where it's going to stick. So when you squash and stretch the device, you're going to see it's going to stick to that bottom right corner. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. So let's go back here into the viewport. And this is a pinwheel, so I'm going to go back in there. I have to create a material, and we're going to have to associate that to this object. And to do that, we're going to go over to the properties panel. So here are the properties. We're going to create that material. I don't see the one that I want, so I'm going to create a new one. It does this gray box, and I'm going to want to go back over here to the asset panel to change the properties of that. So we're going to name it intuitively. pinwheel 1, matte. Maybe matte even, not May. All right, cool. And now there's the image that we have to associate to it. Back over to the properties panel, and we're gonna look for texture or image, whatever you can use to associate to it to make it memorable. And we're gonna use pinwheel 1. There we go, that looks super nice. Now I would like for it, rather than to be completely within the space, to be kind of pulled off to the side. And you just go into the viewport, you're gonna drag and pull, maybe make the size kind of nice. I was looking here in the viewport, and that'll be really good. So regardless of what size it is, it's always gonna be kind of floating along with the bottom right corner. I'm happy with that. So we're gonna do 2 more pinwheels. We're gonna right click on the front of user because that's where it's gonna be located, in front of user. We're gonna add another rectangle. You guys are gonna be pros at this whole material and adding rectangles and stuff. I'm gonna drag it down here to the front. And once again, I see that there's no material associated to it. There's no texture because it's a black and white checkerboard. Go over to the properties here once that's the item. Oh, look, and I haven't renamed it. Let's get into that habit. Pinwheel 2. Go back over to the panels here and the properties, and we're gonna add a material. We want pinwheel 2, so we're gonna create a new material. Head back over to assets, rename it. Pinwheel 2 material, and I'm going back to the properties here for the shader. Choose that image or that texture. It's going to be pinwheel 2. Awesome, love it. I'm going to select it, make it a bit bigger, and probably pull it down. And I want to make sure that it's going to stick to the bottom of the screen. So with that selected, I go back over here to the properties panel. And I'm going to make sure, see how it's selected the top left and the top and the left side. I'm going to deselect those, make sure it just sticks to the bottom. If you wanted it to stay in the center, you would select that middle one if you can, or maybe you can't. There we go, yeah. But I don't want that, I want it to be stuck to the bottom. Okay, cool, so let's do one more in front of the user again. Right click, add rectangle. Yep, we're going to rename it. Pinwheel 3, rock and roll. Okay, and then we're gonna, once again back here, pinwheel 3, rectangle, create a material for it. There you go, name it again. Pinwheel 3, material, and let's go and choose that image from our list. Pinwheel 3, that is pretty. Let's bring it down. Okay, and let's make it bigger. That one's pretty cool, put it right there. Dig it. Okay, and let's make sure that we're pinning it to the bottom left of the screen. So it's always going to stick down there. When in doubt and you're not totally certain how it's going to look, just hover over, yep, bottom left. Super cool. So, how are we doing? Okay, just got a couple more elements. Put a couple of cactus in here. Same thing. I want one cactus in front. So we're going to go back to front of user, right click, add rectangle, bring that baby down. Now you see how it's in front of this element? I actually want it behind that pinwheel. And to do that, I would literally just move it up in this hierarchy. And now you can see it's behind. It's not a cactus yet though, because I have not created a material and I haven't associated a texture to it. But with it selected, and once it's renamed, I'll do this cactus front. Back over to the properties panel, hit that material plus, create a new material, goes gray. You guys know how this goes. We're going to rename material 0 to cactus front, matte, bada boom, bada bing. Choose a texture. You don't want a new one, it's already there. Try again. All right, cactus. Sweet, like it. It looks kind of gray. Like it looks like it's muted because I've created this. I know it's a lot brighter. Let's resize it and let's talk about why it looks that way. Now, you kind of pull it over to the left, maybe make it a bit taller. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so just talking about how it looks in terms of the coloration, I know it's brighter. And when you bring in an asset like this, an image, what it does by default is it creates it as a standard material. So I'm going to click on the material here so that I can talk through it with it selected. And it's the shader type that is automatically set as standard. We want this one because it's a flat illustration. It's a good way to remember it. We would like this one to be flat, and then you can see the true color in which it was created. Now I want to duplicate this, but maybe what we can do is flip it. In order to flip it, that image is going to have to be double-sided. So before I get ahead of myself, let's create a whole new rectangle behind the user, because it's going to appear behind me here. Let's right click. We're going to add a rectangle. Let's drag it over here. It's going to be kind of right behind me. Currently it is not, because it is on the layer that is still in front of the user. We want it behind the user layer. Make sure that's all behind, the banner behind, yes, the rectangle is now behind. You see that? That's super cool. Double click that and say cactus behind. Awesome. And let's do what we've done. Create the material. There it is. And now I'm going to rename it over here. Cactus back. Oops, matte. Okay, awesome. And I'm going to use the cactus again image. So that's a little squashy. That's a very technical term, squashy. All right. I want it a bit taller too. Pull it offside. Yeah, you can just, however you would like it. I'm not going to fuss with it too much. Now, like I said, I could probably, no, that's fine. I don't necessarily want to flip it. I'm just going to show you how it looks if we were to flip it, though, and give you that whole concept of a double-sided image. So with the material selected, that cactus back, I'm going to go over here, and in the shader properties, I'm going to select it as double-sided. Now, if I'm going to do anything with the object, I'll go here into the scene hierarchy, the cactus behind selected, and say I want to rotate it. I don't want to rotate it kind of on the y-axis. I would like to rotate it like 180 to flip it. So that's on the y. The y-axis is this way here. And that's going to be minus 180. Now it's flipped it. Now remember what I was talking about, how that looks a little bit darker. So that's because, once again, when I created a material, by default, the shader property is standard. So I'm going to go back down here to the material, and I'm going to change that shader type to flat, because it's that flat illustration, and that's the color that I want. So guys, look at, we are so close to being finished. This is awesome. Well, finished with the layout. Where we get to have the fun is when we actually get it to move. I'm just going to move that down a tiny bit there. What are we missing? Oh, could it be the taco? That's too much fun. And let's do something with the background too. Left pink and blue is kind of, I'm tired of it. So let us select that. That's not the user. We want the background. And once that's selected, you can, if you don't know what is associated to the canvas or the rectangle or whatever it is, always select it. Have a look on the properties panel again. You're going to have a bit more detail. So I can see that the material that's associated to the background is called background material. So I would go in here and select that background material, and we're finally going to replace that one with, go figure, image background, bada boom. All right, we are so close. So what do we want to do? We want to attach a taco. Let's make it a sombrero. We'll make it big. Let's make a taco sombrero. How do we do that? Well, we need to start tracking the face. And once we're tracking a face, we can attach an object to the face. So let's start with tracking the face. It's also quite simple. So we're going to go over here to the camera. We're going to right click on that. We're going to add a face tracker. That is awesome. And now the only thing that we have to do is say attach a, I don't know, let's attach a canvas to the face. Sure. Or a plane. Plane will work. Why not? And you see there's something fun going on there. There's a whole conversation that we can have about bounding boxes around images. Let's do what we need to do first, and let us address the taco make that happen. Okay, so we're gonna, once again, we've got that black and white checkerboard. You know what we need to do. We need to associate a material to this object. So with it selected, head over to the properties panel, click that plus button on the materials. We're going to create a new material, rename it. It's gonna be the taco mat. Awesome. And we're going to add a taco to my nose. Up here, you're gonna find the controls that will help you to manipulate 3D objects. And in this case, we're going to manipulate the taco. This first one is the move tool. This is a rotate tool. And this is our resize tool. So with that one selected, we're gonna move it up, up, up to my head here. And you see how it's disappearing behind what looks like an an invisible bounding box. I'm going to select the banner and show you. You see what's happening there? Let's zoom in here. When I kind of go behind here, it disappears. So it's the same for the other one. Now what we want to do is with these banner elements, we can either change them to alpha, or I can set this taco to be visible regardless of what's around it. And to do that, that's probably easier. I'm going to select the taco material, and just over here in the properties panel, there's advanced render options. I'm going to allow it to write to depth, and I'm not going to have the depth test. Now you're going to see when I lean back, it's not being affected by any bounding boxes of any objects that are close by. Just a power tip. I would like this taco to be larger. Let's scale it up, shall we? Now I've just, again, quickly kind of gone through this. This is once again move, rotate, and resize. This one I'm going to just mouse over this box when I do, and everything turns white. That means the whole thing is going to scale proportionately. So let's give it a go. Oh mama, look at that taco. That's cool. The only thing that would make this better is if it were a 3D taco. That's a whole other workshop. But for now, we will be happy with this. Woo! Taco sombrero, senor. Okay, cool. I dig it. I also wonder, you know, do I want the banners above here to be in front of the taco? Well, we could do that. And really, all it would take, I should say, is just to move it probably in between front and behind. Maybe change the layer. If it's a user layer, yeah, we're going to add them all to that layer. Okay, so what did I just do there? I changed it to be associated to the user. That's me. And I moved it in between the front of the user, that canvas that we made, and behind the user. So now it's sitting right in the middle, actually right in between. I just dragged and moved it in there. And that gives us this feeling that we're sitting in between the two different banners up top. All right, we've got all of our elements. There's one thing left to do. We have to make it move. Okay, let's get into that. Now it's time to get into the patch editor. Are you ready? I don't think you're ready. Okay, so let's open up the patch editor. And to do that, we're going to do View, Show and Hide the Patch Editor, and voila, there it is. What's going to happen in here? Well, there are a lot of really cool things that are built into Spark AR Studio, not the least of which are patches, which are really just visual blocks of code that allow you to manipulate the objects within your scene. In this case, what we're going to do is manipulate the movement of them. It's done quite easily, as you're going to see, and I would like to start by moving the banners. Let's start with the way that we brought everything in. We'll start with the banners. We'll work our way down. So going back over here to our scene panel, we're going to select the elements that were in front of the user. There was the banner front. Let's select that. And when we're using something within the patch editor, when you want to bring it in, you're going to select it in the hierarchy or in your viewport, and then once again look over to the properties. What you'll want to do is change the position of this banner.
we're going to change it either on the X or the Y axis. The X is back and forth and the Y is up and down. So we're going to want it to kind of swing back and forth. So we definitely want to bring the position into the patch editor because that's what we're going to manipulate. And to do that, we just mouse over this arrow, wait for it to turn yellow, and click on it, and it's going to come into the patch editor. Now, animation can be thought of as basically just transitioning from one location to another. So that's a good way to remember what patch to use. We're going to transition from one side on the X-plane to another. And to activate the transition patch, you're just going to right click within the patch editor. What it does is it brings up this little prompt. You can either search, or when you right click, it's right there. Transition is a popular one. So we're going to click transition, hit add patch. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see it. And now we have the instance that we're going to be affecting, which is the banner front and its 2D position. And we're going to transition from one location to another. Now, as you can see here in this patch, the banner front only has an X and a Y coordinate. Whereas in the transition patch, we've got an X, a Y, and a Z. Essentially, we don't need the Z. So what we're gonna do is when we kind of click on it here and highlight it, you're gonna see this drop-down box below. And right now it says it's vector 3, which means essentially there are 3 elements that are gonna be passed, variables, sorry, from this patch to the next. We only need 2, so we're going to change it to vector 2, and we'll just be dealing with X and Y. Now, when we brought this in, the position where it sits is at 0, 0, and right now what's going to happen is it's going to start at 0, 0, and it's going to transition to 1, 1. Now we want the Y, which is the up and down, to stay exactly where it is, so we're going to keep it from 0 to 0. If we want it to move, we're going to want to move maybe a little bit to the left. So what we're going to do is just move it slightly. Let's give it a -2 movement and see what happens. Now, before we can connect these, we have to also initiate some sort of animation. And in this case, I would like this animation to loop. I'd like it to go back and forth. And once again, when you think through it in natural language, you'll know which patch to pull in. So I would like for it to loop. That means if I right click and then I look here, within the animation patches, I'll be able to select the loop animation. Just a quick word about the patches. There are so many of them. I don't want to overwhelm you with information. Just to know how to access some of these key ones that we're going to be working with today, by right-clicking within the patch editor, you can also go up top and add them that way. Let's just focus on the ones that we're using, but please feel free to explore. There is literally an unlimited wealth of options within the patch editor. So we're going to add that patch. And once we connect these, you're going to see some things happen. So we're going to take this progress and connect it to this progress part of the patch, and we're going to output that node to the banner front. Okay, so we need to make that a little bit more prominent. It's just kind of moving slightly. So let's make it end probably at like -10. That's cool. And it's actually just jumping. So what we want it to do is move to one side and then switch back over. And to do that, we just hit the mirrored option and it's going to move to one side and back. Let's make that movement a little bit more prominent. Start at 10 and go back to 10. And I can see it's getting cut off here on the left side. It means I have to kind of scale it up a little bit bigger so it covers the full width of the screen. And to do that, I'm just going to go back over to the properties panel, make that a 1.5, maybe 1.25. Let's see how that is. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Now the motion itself is kind of jerky, so I don't know how else to put it. And you can control the movement of the animation by the curve. So there are kind of rigid curves, and then there are those that are a bit more graceful and flowing. And by clicking on this option, you're going to see we have a ton to choose from. One that I think always works well, this kind of floating motion is, and forgive me if I mispronounce it because it's quite the word, is sinusoidal in and out. That's what I say. And so it kind of floats gracefully in and out. I like how that looks. We're just going to keep going. So we're going to do the same for the banner in behind.
And if you recall, we placed that on the behind user canvas. So banner behind is selected. Now let's kind of recreate what we've done for this one. We're going to go back over here. If you recall, we're going to be shifting the position of that banner. So we're going to click on this arrow button to bring it into the patch editor. Right click here once again to get that transition patch, because we're going to transition from one location on the X to another one. Add that patch. Now, as you remember as well, there is just an X and Y 2 vectors that we're dealing with, so we'll have to change that here to a vector 2 as well. Move that up a bit. I'll actually move all of this up. We can keep me out here a little bit. And the other thing we have to do is add a loop animation patch. There you go. Bring that over there. It's going to be mirrored. Now the position of this is just at 0, 0. We're going to want to keep the Y where it was. And we're going to probably start, let's go -5 and end at 5. Cool. Let's connect all of them. See what happens. Nice, it's got some nice flowy movement to it. Now, the pacing of both of these animations is the same. We can change it so one is a bit more rapid and one is a bit slower. And to do that, you just look at the duration. So I like the front one. I think 1 second is fine to complete the loop. Let's make that back one a bit slower. So let's make it like a 1.5. Super slow. I can see it's actually getting cut off at the edge there too. Let's just change the scale of that as well to 1.25, make it a bit bigger. That's cool. Okay, I like that. You guys can play around with what kind of motion you like. And we're gonna keep going here and animate these pinwheels in the front. So I'm gonna just keep that kind of small. I'm gonna pull this down a bit so we can work a bit larger in the patch editor. So what's going to happen is we're going to select one of the pinwheels. Let's just choose the first one that we worked with. And again, talking through the logic, what you want to do is bring it into the patch editor. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be changing the rotation of it. So within the properties, once again, find that arrow. This is going to bring it into the patch editor, and it's going to change the rotation of the pinwheel. Now, once again, you're going to have to transition from one location to another. We can add a transition patch. It just snuck over there. We're going to bring it back over here. And I mean, we don't have to change this to a single vector, but just for the sake of time, we're just going to keep it the vector 3, because this here has 3 vectors. So our transition patch is going to have 3 vectors as well. Now, I know that if we rotate it, not full 360, but 359, it's going to simulate almost a full circle. And what we want to do is, again, have a looping animation, so it'll continuously loop and circle. We just add another loop patch. So a lot of this is repetition, and you get the hang of it once you've done it a few times. So we're going to see what happens when we connect all of these patches together. Look at it go. I mean, go pinwheel. Woo! That is too fast. And that's totally cool. I mean, if it's like a car, there's another idea. But we want that duration to be spread out so it's slower. So let's make it like a nice slow-mo 10 seconds. You got double Lianne here in the viewport. There you go. 2 angles never hurt. Okay, let's do the same thing for pinwheel number 2. Keep it moving along here. What are we doing? We are changing the rotation. So you have selected here in the scene panel. We are gonna select the rotation, bring it into the patch editor. Now, for those of you who are tired of repetition, we can do copy and paste. One caveat though is you just have to click out of the hierarchy or anything that you have selected, or else you're going to be copying, pasting all the things you have selected. We're just going to select the loop animation. We are going to Command or Control C and Command or Control V to duplicate that in the patch editor. Super awesome, right? Now this is going to be spinning the same way if I leave it at 3:59. Let's do a minus so it goes the other direction for pinwheel number 2. Connect that baby and let's see it go. Nice. So the thing is it's actually moving along at the same speed as this other pinwheel. Let's try and vary that. And why is it still, there we go, because I didn't hit enter. So it can be going in this direction now. Let's make it a little bit slower, make it like 12 seconds. It's just nice, maybe 15, make it really slow. Nice to have variety in the types of animation that we're doing. And just by changing numbers, that's how easy it is to control the animation. Isn't that cool? All right, so we've got one more pinwheel to go. Let's do what we do. We're going to control the rotation, bring it into the patch editor. Same thing, I'm going to deselect and then copy and paste this loop and transition. Which direction do we want it to go in? Let's have it turn inwards. So let's remove that minus. Let's make it, well, let's see what 15 looks like. And I want it to turn inward. Sorry, let's do a minus on that. I guess that's pretty cool. Let's go slower. Slower. Let's make it 18. There we go. Yeah, cool. I dig it. Okay, so we have things moving. We have a taco. We got pinwheels going. I think we're pretty much done. The only other thing that we could do that would be kind of cool is to introduce those cacti and bring them in, kind of popping in. Let's try that. That's actually a fun and easy thing to do. It's a little bit different than looping animation because it plays once and then it stops. So how do we do that? Well, let's think through it logically. Let's start with the first one. Let's start with let's select it in the viewport. Let's start with the cactus front. And like we've done with all the other things is we're gonna bring it into the patch editor. What are we gonna be changing about it? We're gonna be changing its position, right? So we're gonna want it to start down below and we're gonna want it to pop up into the viewport. So in order to do that, we'll have to change its Y position. Let's bring it into the patch editor. Here's something that you wanna make note of. When you're bringing it in, there are going to be values that are already preset because I have moved this object within the viewport. I brought it into this lower left area of the canvas, so it has coordinates for the X and Y. What we want to do is, again, bring in the transition patch because we're going to transition from one Y location to another. So let's add that. And again, because there are only the 2 coordinates, we're just going to switch it to a vector 2. Now, what we're going to do is copy the X and Y as it exists, because that's going to be the final landing point. So we want that to make sure that we include that for our endpoint here. So you just copy and paste those values as your ending point. What we need to figure out is where we would like for it to start. So it's going to be the same on the X. We're not bringing it in or out. So we're just going to keep that at minus 48. And a question of where will it start for 355? Probably double what it is further down. So probably 700 is where it would start to be below. And then what we have to do is get it to move. We want it to move as soon as the effect opens, and that's called runtime. So when it starts running, when the effect starts running at runtime, we're going to look for that patch, and we're going to trigger the transition. So runtime is in the patch editor. At runtime, we want this to transition from these locations in Y and on the Y. Now to see it, because we have to trigger it at runtime, at the beginning we have to stop. We're gonna have to restart this. Oh look, I look so cute. And then hit play. Let's see what happens. Boom. Okay, so there are a couple of things there that I noticed. It just had a set duration and it had a very linear animation. So how do we control the amount of time that passes for this transition to happen? That's something as well that's very intuitive. It's the progress of the transition. There's a patch for that. We're going to right click and we're going to find the progress patch and we're going to add it in. So we want that progress to be maybe just a little bit shorter than what it is already. Now, if you want to bring this in between the beginning trigger, which is runtime, and the transition patch, you have to just repipe in both of those into the progress patch. Bring it in and pipe it out. It'll automatically replace it. And let's restart it. Let's see what happens here. Play. Ooh, okay, so that's kind of slow. Let's make it a bit faster. Restart. Boop. Okay, that's kind of fun. Now, the animation or the transition is quite linear. If you look in the patch editor, we want it to have a bit of character. Okay, let's try overshoot in and out. That one's kind of fun. Restart. Boop. That's fun. Make it a bit longer. So these are all variables that you can change to whatever your liking is. That's, okay, I like that. That's cool. That'll do. Now, the only other thing that I would want to do with that is just make sure that it starts after a couple seconds, because sometimes you just need to get your bearing of what's happening in the effect. And to do that, I would, after runtime, ask that it delay until it starts playing. So guess what? There's a patch for that. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to search for it because it's not readily right there. And we're going to hit delay and we're going to add that in. Now we want that to happen right after runtime. We want it to delay for like maybe 2 seconds. And we're going to now repipe that in and extend it out to the progress patch. Let's see what happens. Now what we can predict will happen is that the input, which is the start of runtime, will get to 2, will trigger this delay, which will start the progress animation to bring that cactus into the scene. Here we go. 1, 2, pop. Cool. And voila, we have an animation that will allow it to play out over some delay and bring in a little joyful pop into your effect. And so we're going to do the same thing for cactus behind. I'm going to select it here in my scene panel, go over here, and we're going to be controlling the position of it, bring that into the patch editor. And I'm going to take note again of these variables. It's an X and Y of 221 and 210. We're going to need to change those in our transition patch. So I'm going to add the patch. I could copy and paste, but we'll just enter it this way. It's going to end up at 221. It's going to be the same to start, and it's going to end at 210. Where do we want it to begin? Probably down around 800, just to be sure, nice and low. Okay. These we can copy and paste. I'm just going to click out, make sure I'm not selecting anything I don't want. We're going to copy, whoops, not that. We're going to not cut, we're going to copy and paste. Awesome. Now we're going to connect all of those and see how it pops up. Let's restart. 1, 2, pop, pop. Okay. So like I said, the variables are going to be pretty similar. Whoops, why did these undo? That's strange. Sometimes strange things happen in the patch editor. We just see if it happens again. And then if it does, we file a bug report. Okay. So now what I would like to do is delay this So now what I would like to do is delay this back cactus from popping up just a little bit longer. Let's give it like a 3-second delay. I just changed that for the cactus behind. Let's reload it. 1, 2, pop, pop. That was way too slow. Let's go with 2.25. Let's say 2.5. Okay, duration's the same. Let's try again. 1, 2, pop, pop. Okay, I find it's moving quite slowly, so the progress has got to be faster. Maybe it's starting out way too low. Maybe that's why.
These are all variables that you can change as you go along. We're going to do one more restart and then we're going to be done. Pop, pop. Okay. And as you can see, we've changed the transition type to overshoot, so it has that fun bounce. We have not yet done that with the cactus in the back, so let's change it to overshoot in and out, and we should be good to go. Cool. So as you can see, a lot of the tweaks and changes that are to my taste are literally just kind of monkeying around with some of the numbers that you see within the patch editor. And once you get in here and you get your own effect built, then you're going to be able to do all kinds of different variations that suit whatever it is that you're building. I wonder if we have a couple of minutes to do the face mesh, and we can add a couple of avocados to the cheeks. Let's do it quickly. If you follow along, awesome. This will be for those that have extra time at the end and want to maybe just add a little something. Let's add to our face tracker like we did with the taco. Let's do a face mesh, and then we'll attach the material with the texture to that. So I'm just going to find that face tracker over here in the scene hierarchy. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to add a face mesh. There we go. That looks fun because it has no material, so now I have a checkerboard face. I can see it's interfering somewhat with some of the boundaries that we experienced previously. And when I go in to manipulate this material that I'm going to make for this, we're going to make sure that we remove those check marks on the right to depth. So let's rename this avocados. So that's what we're going to do. Let's make a material for it. Create a new material. Oh, we did this before. Avomat. Let's do that. And we're going to find our texture. We are going to add avocados to the face. Did you see how fast that was? Now let's address this issue where it's disappearing behind the boundary box, the invisible boundary box. And what we want to do is visit again under the properties, the advanced render options, and just uncheck those. And it will make sure that it writes, regardless of what's around it, it's going to write to the full depth of this camera view. So there's actually one other thing that I'd really like to do to add some depth to this effect. And what I want to do is add a blur to that background banner. That would be really awesome. And to do that, all we have to do is resource the Spark AR library. There's so many assets available in there. And this patch in particular is really easy to use. You just have to search the AR library, and what we're going to do is search for blur. Oops, just activate that field, blur, enter. There's a patch asset there that we can import for free. We're going to import that. It's going to show up in our asset panel. We'll close this off. And let's have a look there. Blur, awesome. I just grab it from the asset panel. I'm going to drag it into my patch editor. When we zoom in this way here, you're going to see it's looking for a texture and an output material. So I just want to make sure that I didn't just duplicate the material for the front and the back. And to do that, I can see that there's only a front banner. Let's duplicate that to make a back banner material. And what we'll do is just rename that banner back material and make sure that our banner in the back is using that different material. Banner behind, make sure it's using the banner back. Cool, so now we can associate a blur to the material that's associated to this banner in the back. All right, and let's define what the texture is. It's the image texture. So you can have the same texture applied to different materials. As long as you define the materials separately, one can be blurred and one doesn't have to be. And that's what I've just done there, is I've created two separate materials. And so I will bring this material, I'll select it, I'll bring it into the patch editor by looking over here at the properties and bringing in the texture of banner background. Now when I connect these, it should just
create? Yeah, I created a blur there. Let's get it bigger so we can see. Let's detach that. Here we go. Maybe we need it a bit more blurred. Yeah, that's awesome. So it's a bit fuzzy looking. Even if we reduce over here in the properties panel, reduce the alpha, it gives it that kind of distanced look. And friends, that is the end of our build for this effect. Let's zoom out on the patch editor, see what we did in there. Yep, we created a bunch of animations. These pinwheels in the front. Our cacti popped up. I'm gonna restart that again, just admire how they pop up. Boom, boom, awesome. We positioned ourselves in space between two banners and we blurred a banner in the back. Holy camole, that was just like a whole ton of stuff that you guys just hopefully did. If you didn't, this is gonna be recorded. You can come back and do it again. And I'm also gonna be hanging out in the breakout rooms to help you navigate your way through this really, I hope, fun and playful effect. And I really hope that you enjoyed your time learning from me and learning how to animate your static images in the patch editor. So I look forward to whatever it is that you're going to create from here. And just remember that publishing really is the next step of this journey. And it's really where we get the feedback from the people that are using it to build and grow our expertise and our knowledge base. Because when we see others using it in an unpredictable way out there in the wild, then we can take that knowledge and apply it to what it is that we're doing and make sure that we can make adjustments and learn from other people's experiences. So I hope you go ahead and publish. It's a really big part of it. All you would do then is just hit the publish button here. What it's going to do is ask if you want to publish a new effect. And when we look at the file requirements for Facebook, it's definitely less than 10 megs. Instagram, it's under 4, so that's good. Performance will be very good. Meets all the requirements. Then what you would do is click upload, and it'll take you to the Spark AR Hub that is associated to your Facebook account. So, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you stayed awake and you were able to keep up with all the twists and turns that happen within Spark AR. Please hit me up with questions, and I look forward to seeing what you all create. Definitely take the time to post what you're doing. Remember that this is just a big sketchbook, what we're doing. This is not your final Mona Lisa. Take the time to learn and to edit and make revisions and change what it is that you're doing and play around really and publish it and see what happens. Thanks very much for joining me today. I appreciate it.